very much for joining us today. It was very lovely to see you here. We met before, of course, but it's really lovely to see you. I did in our introduction kind of mentioned a little bit about yourself, who you are, where and what you really do. But to start off this conversation, please tell us a little bit about yourself and bit about your background, perhaps.
Yeah, thank you, Shirosh, for inviting me to do this podcast. So for the introduction purposes, hi, I'm Shobha Ahi, placed as Deputy Director and Senior Research Fellow at the Drug Control Center, King's Forensics at King's College London. I am an anti-doping scientist by profession, and I'm into this field for over 16 years, where I'm dealing with testing of drugs and prohibited substances in sports.
That's brilliant. I'm really going to talk a lot about this subject, but it's such an interesting subject, right? The anti-doping, especially, these days that, there are quite a few sporting events happening, like one happening in Birmingham and so on. So it's quite an interesting topic indeed. So just for example, don't know much about it. Please tell us a little bit about what exactly is doping. And why should we really care about it? Because if everybody's getting, the substances, then it would be fine, right? So why should we care about doping?
So, I understand your concern and the question that why we should be worrying about doping. So to put it into simple terms, doping is the unlawful use of drugs or techniques to increase the performance in sports competition or during sports competition. It is a serious concern for two prime reasons. One is it's a sort of cheating, which is unethical, and it does not promote fair play in sports. And the second one is that substances which are abused by athletes may lead to harmful and permanent side effects, including cardiovascular diseases, heart attacks, or sudden death, etc. I would say, in addition, the continuous use of a few prohibited substances can also lead to addiction, which can have very serious impact on individuals.
So it's not just a matter of somebody takes doping substance, they can run fast or do whatever they, that's perform, in a better level compared to other athletes. It does also damage to themselves.
Yeah.
And have long-term effects on their health as well. So it's not just that they're doing doping and just, for that particular time or place, but it's actually have a long-term effect for that individual as well. So that's an overall negative impact on the society and our sports, and of course, that's something that we want to kind of prevent in the longer term, right? Otherwise, it has a detrimental impact.
Yeah, at the community level, I would say that it can have an impact at the community level if you consider apart from the sports fraternity as well, because in a way, all the athletes do belong to a social class, and then the drugs, whatever has been abused, then it just travels through. It's just not a good practice.
Absolutely. It's terrible, really. And so just before we talk a bit more about anti-doping, really, and doping in general, it's just, that sounds like such a specialized subject, such a, I don't know, like maybe I'm out of place to say this, but it doesn't feel like something that somebody would just bump into, like, for example, I don't know, doing economics or mathematics, which are much more broader subjects, but here it's a very specialized area. Why did you get interested in this? It's like not by accident, I'm guessing. It's because you liked it.
Yeah, to be honest, I have never heard about anti-doping or doping-related activities by the time I was just pursuing my bachelor's or master's degree. But yes, I was always interested in doing science. And after completing my master's in biochemistry, I was looking forward for a PhD scholarship. And that was when I encountered the position for a research fellow to work on the project for the development of new and improved methods for detection of prohibited substances in sports. And the topic sort of was quite fascinating for me because when I had a look at the topic, I just tried to look at some literature. Okay, what's that happening around? So definitely the project topic was very fascinating and different, which sparked my interest to approach for a PhD in anti-doping science at the National Dope Testing Laboratory, NDTL, which is the WADA accredited laboratory in New Delhi, India. So that's how I landed up in there.
Wow. So you kind of had I mean, you were saying like 17 years, right? So you have been in this business for a long time.
Long time.
So that's really impressive, actually. So why did you, what are some of the areas, or what are some of the key aspects, if you had to kind of maybe summarize, like, why is it so fascinating in terms of a subject? I mean, I understand the end result, or the end result of what that research is, but in the research itself, if you think about the research itself, why is it so fascinating? Like, for example, for a PhD student to do it, or if they're considering doing it, why would they?
I would say that the thing I love about anti-doping is like it is ever challenging, because there are always new substances, therapeutic drugs and medicines which are coming to the market, being added to the list. And so we, as the anti-doping scientists, are always on our toes to keep doing the new method. So there is new learning each and every day. You are doing your methods.
Never boring.
Never boring. So it involves a part of routine as well, definitely, where you do test the samples and as per your routine activities. But in terms of developments, improvements, it never ends.
Yeah,
like
absolutely,
it's
absolutely,
so
yeah.
that's a beauty of anti-doping science, I would
Absolutely,
say.
absolutely. That's, yeah. I mean, of course, you have to have that kind of level of enthusiasm, to keep going, and you can only have so much of it if things are the same. If you're doing the same things every day, right? When you're finding something new, when you're learning something new, and that's where enthusiasm comes in. That's where you think, oh, it's something else to think about and look at. So that's I totally understand that. So just to kind of come back to it, we'll talk about more about the research aspect a little bit later. But in order to go back to this, I for myself, and I'm sure others as well, might not know too much about the process itself. Can you tell us a little bit about the process? So, for example, the drug control plays a key part in, like, Olympics. We were talking about it, or other sporting events. But how does it work? How does this process work from your perspective, and maybe from the perspective of the athletes, right? Because it might be, I'm guessing it's a bit of a daunting experience for them as well, the testing process.
Yeah, of course. So just to elaborate on how does it work, anti-doping is actually being managed by the World Anti-Doping Agency, which is WADA, which promotes, coordinates, and monitors the fight against doping in sports in all its forms. So this is an agency which is working towards harmonization of anti-doping rules, policies, testing, result management, laboratory analysis, and everything in a way that it should just be in the same way wherever the sample is tested. So this organization, WADA, came into existence in 1999, and it has a set of rules, as I said, to be applied to sample collection, testing, analysis, investigations, result management, etc., in a harmonized manner. The national anti-doping organizations within the countries, the NADOs, or the sports federations, are actually responsible for planning and collection and transport of the samples as per the test distribution plan, which is based on, obviously, a lot of intelligence and research at their end, because they need to know, okay, if this competition is happening, fine, they would be testing or collecting samples for all the winners. But apart from the winners, or who else, they maintain a profile, we maintain a profile of the sample. So who else can be tested, who is based on all the intelligence they gather from the data and everything. Or during the out of competition testing, when it is not the competition period, then also lots of science goes behind, like what athletes or which are the athletes or samples which are to be targeted for testing purposes. So everything on the terms of collection of samples is managed by the NADO of that country, or the sports, or the specific sports federations. The sample, once collected, is transported to the accredited laboratory, which is always a WADA accredited laboratory, with a coded sample number with proper chain of custody. So that's when we come into existence as an anti-doping laboratory who works in compliance with the WADA International Standard of Laboratory. So that, I would say, is the basic guideline which every laboratory has to follow to handle and test the samples as per the rules. The samples, once received, are booked into the system of the laboratory, which is usually a laboratory information management system, LIMS. So we check the paperwork, the sample is received, it's booked. We measure that the seals are intact, it is coded, there is no identity being revealed of the athletes and things like that. And then later on, the sample undergoes extraction procedures to extract different kind of substances or whatsoever, what are the intended substances which we want to get out of the samples, followed by analysis, mainly on the hyphenated chromatographic and mass spectrometric equipment, and also other immunoassay techniques like for growth hormone testing purposes and things like that. So after the analysis happens on the instruments, the results as the output are reviewed by the certifying scientists before being reported, whether it is a negative result or is it a suspect or it is a positive result. So what happens is, fine, negative results, to certifying scientists would review it, and we will collate all the data for one sample from all across the procedures which have been actually done on that sample, and the results are reported. If in case there is a suspicious sample, for instance, like let's say when we screen the sample, we test for more than 400 plus substances in one particular sample. But if, let's say, a sample is suspicious for any one of the prohibited substance, and then the confirmation test is repeated on a fresh aliquot of the sample, specifically targeting that particular substance for which the sample is found suspicious for. And then the confirmation test is repeated and the results are reported accordingly. The whole laboratory process definitely happens in a continuous chain of custody where each and every step is recorded. So I would say that everything happening from sample reception until sample reporting has to be at very sensitive. It is all very sensitive. It is all very sensitive, and we also have to take care in each and every step, because each and every step is very important while we are doing the samples.
Yeah, because so I didn't realize. So effectively there is testing happening not just during a competition, but when there is no competitions as well. So effectively the athlete is kind of monitored, as it were. Monitored is probably not the right word, but that there is continuous governance on that athletes, I would say maybe not behavior, but making sure that there is no performance enhancing process happening even out of competition time as well, so that there is a continuous monitoring kind of process that's going on. So if you're an athlete, you have to maintain the professional standard throughout your career, as it were, right? So that's a very important part. And then I really like the idea. No, I mean, it is quite important, but because everything is kind of coded. You have once it leaves the athlete. Once a sample leaves the athlete, nobody really knows who it belongs to. Yeah. So that's very important part as well. So that, there is almost like a blind, it's a double, like a test, right? So that's really, really important as well. And of course, there's so many verification processes happening over the period of time, because of course, a positive test is not just somebody says positive. It's not like, saying you are, I don't know, COVID positive or something. I mean, it could be, maybe if you're saying COVID positive, it could be, devastating as well for somebody. But in this particular case, it has much more, like an impact where it would affect their career completely, I would think. And of course, there are endorsement deals, career prospects, it's monetary value. All these things are getting affected by a positive result, right? So it's very, So there's huge responsibility on yourself, but also not just yourself in the sense of the lab, but other labs that are performing this kind of thing, right? So are all labs, and as you said, they're all labs have to they have to follow the same guidelines provided by the World Anti-Doping Association, the agency, right? So that's really a cohesive, a consistent process across the world that we have, which allows this to be at the highest possible standard, which is an amazing thing, right, to achieve. And coming back to the testing itself, and we talked about it a little bit before that, the DCC, or the Drug Control Center at King's Forensics, is the only lab in the UK that has this accreditation, right? And I mean, I would have thought that maybe there are more, but actually that's quite a surprising thing to find out, that there's only one lab in the UK. What makes King's College Lab quite special? What makes it that as we were talking about the introduction, it has done a huge contribution to many sporting events, right? So what is the special? Why is the lab so special, as it were?
Yeah. So about the accredited laboratory, I would definitely say that the King's College Lab is special because there are only 30 other accredited laboratories across the world.
Well,
and
right.
Yeah, and DCC being one of them, and the only one of its kind in the UK. So definitely it's special.
Yeah.
And we test for approximately 12,000 to 13,000 samples on an average in a year, which means that the laboratory is always busy. As I said, that the samples are collected from out of competition period as well as from the competition period. Basically, the basic differences from the out of competition period to the competition period is the competition period includes drugs and substances which are like short-term acting, for example, stimulants or narcotics. If someone has abused something for a painkiller or something like that, just to perform well in that competition. While for the out of competition period, if someone is abusing steroids, let's say, just to build the muscle mass, which takes a lot of time, 2 months, 3 months to build the muscle mass so that they can perform well during a competition, which is 3 months after. So this is how there is a demarcation on what testing protocol is to be applied, or what test menu should be applied to a sample when it is out of competition or in competition. So this is how we spread across the samples all over the year. So not only during the events, but also at the other times we test and keep testing for the samples in and out of the laboratory. The samples requires definitely a time-bound reporting, which makes the laboratory target-oriented place, as there are deadlines to meet. For the out of competition period, I would say we get standard, 20 days turnaround time to report a sample, but it is a bit of a fast paced kind of thing during the competition period, because if suppose some athlete has to, a sample is collected today and the athlete is supposed to perform tomorrow in a finals, and he's selected for at semifinals today. So we have to get the results by tomorrow. So it is like a very fast turnaround times requirement as well, which the laboratories is supposed to meet at times. So
that's very interesting. And I didn't, that is so true, right? Because, you just have to, because it could be that, I mean, there are so many different variables that you have to worry about, because not just that you have to continually, keep through that process, but at the same time, you need to ensure that the athlete is actually doing things that, you're following the progression of the athlete as well in some ways, right? So that's really, and like, for example, Wimbledon or World Cup or whatever, that it doesn't go on forever. It just goes on for a specific period of time, and you must be getting really busy, like, at a particular time. And I can't imagine that must be quite a lot of responsibility, right? So that goes back to the previous point that you were talking about, making sure that there is identity is kind of masked from the testing component, and then there are other things like making sure the athletes themselves are part of this process across the world, what are the safeguards that are applied on the lab right now? What I mean by that is, so imagine that I mean, you mentioned the chain of custody. You mentioned that there are many different tests are performed, even if there's a positive, there is verification and the verification and so on. However, how can complete outsider looking at it from a very, let's say, a cynical perspective, which is not a right nice word, but let's say that it is the case. How can we convince someone to say that the lab is doing the amazing job it's doing to the highest possible standard? What are the safeguards that are around that process to ensure that we deliver the best work possible?
Yeah. So yes, definitely. If the baseline to it is, if a laboratory is accredited by WADA, it has to pass and pass and pass every time certain kind of standards and parameters to be accredited, to remain accredited, and to keep testing the sample. The basic requirement of WADA accreditation is you have to have the ISO IEC 17025 2017 accreditation, where you have assessments every year by the national agency responsible for this ISO standard, and who comes in, checks you, whatever you have performed, and monitors your performance and everything you have worked around in a year, and also looks at your non-conformances if there had been any, and advises you for how you have to improve. And this is how, if the ISO 17025 accreditation is granted to you, so then only you can have the WADA accreditation being maintained. So that's the basic requirement. Apart from that, for the WADA accreditation, the laboratories are supposed to participate in lots of proficiency testing schemes as well, which are called in our terms as external quality assurance schemes, where every quarter we get samples from WADA to test, where we know, okay, these are WADA samples and we have to test for them, and they come to us, but we don't know what's inside. So we just test using our routine procedures and then report the results, and we get the output of it in a way, which happens every quarter. Other than this, we also get like a sort of double blind samples by WADA, where WADA just puts the sample mixed up in our routine samples, and we don't know that it's from WADA. So we get the samples from we mixed up with our routine sample, and we test for it and report for it. And later on, we are notified that, oh, it was a WADA sample and you have tested. So that means that it is not that you are only treating, the WADA proficiency testing samples as special samples with all the caution and everything, because you never know which sample would turn out to be a proficiency testing sample. So if you have to do each and every sample with up to the same standards and things like that. And also not only because you want to pass the proficiency testing round, but also because you have certain amount of credibility, or you own the credibility, because an athlete's life and career is attached to any result you report in the sample. So you have to actually treat every sample with all the caution as much as possible.
It's a matter of professional pride as well.
Yes. So you have to keep maintaining your integrity, even if it is, whether it is a proficiency testing sample or not, but you have to just follow all the set guidelines and rules as applicable for the testing of the samples. Apart from that, I would say that we also have, like, in every batch we do of sample, we have internal quality controls, which has to pass, and things like that, which we maintain to ensure the validity of our results. So there are different kinds of parameters which the laboratory maintains to say that all the results are accurate and precise, whatever is being reported. I can also say that the other kind of test for the laboratories which happens is the B sample testing. Basically, what happens when a sample is collected from the athlete, it is split into two bottles, A sample and the B sample, and this is how it is. The coded bottles comes to the lab. And when we register the samples, we just open the A sample, do the screening analysis. If it is suspicious, take a fresh record, do the confirmation analysis, and report the result. And if it is a positive, we may have we may have the request for the B sample analysis. The B sample analysis, which was stored frozen as per the guidelines, is only taken out of the freezers of the storage space, and it happens mostly in front of the athlete or their witnesses, whosoever it is. So they get to know, they get to see actually how the sample is being taken out. The seal gets opened in front of them, and they get to see all the procedure the laboratory performs here. And definitely whatever the result was we have reported in the A sample has to match in the B sample, because
Absolutely.
otherwise there
Yes.
is no validity of results. So yes, this is how, again, a kind of, I would say, a kind of test, because B sample analysis, yes, always causes some kind of anxiety, but we always have to meet the requirements of whatever test has been. So it has to be, I mean to say, everything has to be so very accurate, because there
Absolutely.
are various levels of things going on in the full process to check everything is accurate. Yeah,
Absolutely. And that's really, transparent as possible, right? I mean,
yeah,
the athlete, I mean, let's just say that by mistake or something has happened and he was positive, or she was, whoever was positive, tested, and they are checking in, I mean, you're doing the checks in front of them. So there is absolutely no anxiety, not more than anxiety, like doubt in your mind. Did something happen in the lab that allowed, and so that's really important for the athlete even to move forward without having that doubt as well, right? So, forgetting everything else. So it's really, really important, I think. So going back to the testing process itself, and you mentioned that over time there are, so as you said, there are many different organizations, effectively internal and external, making sure that the lab is performing to the highest possible standard. But of course, the things change around us all the time. There are much more new and fancy drugs that come out for doing different things. How do you keep up with all that? Because clearly that is as you mentioned, the testing is a momentous task. But to me, because my background is maybe in data, I feel that keeping up with all those changes is even a bigger challenge to deal with. How do you guys deal with that?
Yeah, so I think, in my opinion, routine and research in any anti-doping lab has to go hand in hand. And this is also like something WADA expects from us, because they have like also a rule that a certain amount of budget every laboratory has to spend on research. So they have to keep on keep up with the ongoing research or whatsoever is happening in the lab. So in our lab also, like, we have a structure, like we have a set of analysts and scientists who perform the routine analysis, and we have a set of postdoc students who are actually working on the newer techniques and methods and to implement whatsoever new is going on worldwide on the things. And we also have like PhD students and MSc dissertation student who work on the smaller project, do some pilot work, and then we can like carry forward the pilot work they have done to a different level of stage, and then keep presenting this work at various level of conferences happening all over world, which are related to anti-doping and toxicology and things like that. So yes, this is how actually it functions, that the researchers have to work in a way where they can do some methods, do some good things, present, and then maybe if it is approved, the routine plugs and plays it in the laboratory. So things like that. Yes, this is how it works.
Absolutely, and so and I think we when we spoke last time, you kind of mentioned like there is I think there's like a database or something like that. Let's keep track of all like all the types of I would say things that might trigger a positive result, or maybe I'm just saying stuff that is not true. But I remember there's something like this where that you keep track of all this information. So you need to make sure that that is matching your testing procedures, and if there are changes to these testing procedures, if there are changes to some of the these medicine or these things that might be considered a doping substance, then you might have to kind of change your tactics, change your processes so that WADA might say, actually, you know what, we want it to be not just 3 months, but it should be 6 months. So now we should test for this particular thing, but also for this other thing. So, continuous changes that you have to maintain, not just from one side where the data comes from or the input from the subjects or from athletes, but also from the other side where things are changed from what to test as well. So it's a continuously moving target, isn't it?
Yeah.
That's a huge challenge.
Yeah, that's a challenge. And also because as you're saying, that there can be different things which we have to look at. So one is like what we were speaking of until now is a kind of direct doping, I would say, where a sample comes to you, you test for it, and then you report the results. The another form is a kind of indirect doping markers. So what happens is like you have certain markers in your own body which gets excreted or you get into your samples, which the laboratories are supposed to monitor and then upload the results into the WADA system. Or for each and every athlete, the results are uploaded into the WADA system, which is known as the ADAMS system. And so what happens is when we test a sample, we report the results, we monitor these markers and report the results. And if we see, oh, this marker from the last collected sample or the last collected sample has gone like significantly up or down, that means something has happened which has affected, these are like termed as indirect markers of doping, which gets affected when they have abused some other kind of drugs. So yes, this is another kind of thing which you have to keep up to date with. So there are hematological modules of markers which have to be maintained in blood, or steroidal modules which have to be maintained in urines. And WADA is also now upcoming with endocrine module as well, which will monitor the growth hormones levels in the body, because like, for instance, we all have growth hormones in our body, but what happens if someone is abusing it in some way or some other thing, which is actually not detectable by direct procedure. But if you keep monitoring the levels of an individual, and if it goes like haywire, and then you can spot, oh, there is something must have been taken, that's why this is happening, and things like that. But it sounds easy, but actually there is a lot of science happening behind this, because to establish test methods to detect all these critical stuff is like not so very easy, I would say.
And also it's not like it's not like they are abundant in blood. It's probably like a millionth of a small particle is so much, it's not easy to detect.
Yeah, it goes to nanogram up to picogram levels as well. So it is like very minute.
Exactly.
To keep testing.
Wow, that's incredible, really. Actually, that's it really leads back to my next question, which I wanted to kind of talk about, is that we kind of mentioned that you have been in this let's say in this business for 17 years or more than that, and you have worked with athletes, you have worked with different labs, you have worked with different organizations, accreditation bodies, and so many different people. What are some of the lessons that you've learned, or in terms of perhaps that you can kind of share, that gives maybe an insight into your career over the past 17 years?
I would say to be like, if you want to have your career in science, you have to do a lot of reading, and never give up reading is one sort of advice to everyone who's doing science. Because reading in any form is like, if you're doing a literature review or something related to that, which is even interdisciplinary, gives you so much enormous amount of information that you can just have lots and lots of ideas to implement in your own research, or to design another kind of research project and things like that. And also it is not only to do the reading of the literature to do research basically, but this review of literature or reading of literature material, or even the guidelines as set by WADA for us, if you just go through them and understand them bit by bit, it is like very easy for you to actually interpret what you are supposed to do. Because if you're reading it, you're understanding it. Otherwise you're just out of blue about not making this is not making sense, that is not making sense. But if you just inculcate a habit of reading as much as possible, I think you can definitely ensure quality to your end results.
Absolutely. And also as you mentioned earlier, in your lab, there are many different people who are doing different jobs for different reasons, but to achieve a common goal. And they all have to have that discipline in them to make sure that you come up with the way of, scientific methods, understanding what something means, and all that kind of stuff. It's just really, really important, right? So going back to your lab itself, it's very much an important way of looking at the world. Your lab is situated in, well, it is part of, it is in King's College, and it is in a beautiful part of London, in central London, as I'm sure you know. We're discussing that. I used to, when I was in undergraduate, I used to, let's say, hang around King's College and Imperial College. Well, we will not go into the reasons why I was doing that, but let's not. But anyway, but it's a beautiful part of London, right? And not just that, it's there's a lot of history and so on. So King's College, how does the university help you in your research to enable you and to empower you and your team to to do the best job that you guys are doing right now?
I particularly feel that I have been about King's College, that it is definitely a very fantastic institution to work with. Obviously, I'm working with King's College for last 2.5 years, because before this, I was working with the National Dope Testing Laboratory in India. But I would say that King's College definitely provides a lots of training courses and things like that for researchers to develop in various areas, like even if it is for research projects writing, or how you have to manage your research, how you have to manage your outcomes, how you have to do the statistical analysis, everything. I mean, there are lots of courses going on. The complete environment is very supportive and researcher oriented, because you feel different disciplines of science happening around, which you can even collaborate with different departments within the college. So that, for instance, if you can see, I'll give you an example. Like if you see, okay, I can see there is one drug which it gets excreted in a kind of metabolite, which I think would be excreted for a longer period of time as compared to the parent drug. So I have the possibility of collaborating with any other department in my college, which can help me doing the synthesis of that metabolite as a component, and then I can include that in my procedure. So I would say, in terms of that, being in an academic institution helps a lot to take the research to the next level. And as I've said, that various internal courses to develop researchers are also organized by the university, which helps to foster the environment of research.
Absolutely, absolutely, and of course, the university, because it's also part of University of London. The library is amazing. You have access to everything you need. If they don't have it, they will get it through. I think they will go to. I mean, if they used to, I'm sure they do still do it. They would order from the British Library from Boston Spa. So everything you need, you can just access.
Accessible.
So it's amazing. It's an amazing place. So we're kind of coming to the end of our conversation, which has been really lovely, and it has personally been really informative for me. So I just want to ask, in your career and in your lab as well, what are the next challenges that you see right now, and what are you kind of working towards? I don't know if you can share some, but if you can, please do share us. Share with us. It'd be really lovely to know what they might be.
Yeah. So the laboratory, as such, we are working on various projects which are actually for the future of anti-doping looks like. So one prominent subject is the testing for dry blood spots. So what happens right now is we get the samples as in urines, which are like massive amounts of urines to test with A and B samples. And this is now a new kind of sample matrix which is being tested, which is dry blood spots, where the sample just comes in as a drop of blood dried on a paper. And then you have to develop methods for just testing everything on that drop of blood, basically. So I am currently working on a project where I'm looking at how to set up the new methods for the testing on dry blood spots. Other than that, we are also doing a few methods on growth hormone markers, as I have said, where we have to establish this endocrine module of monitoring the growth hormone abuse. So definitely different other areas we are working in. Apart from that, we are also working on some of the smaller project, which is like a new marker metabolite identification and some large peptides, method setup for some large peptides and things like that. So yes, there is a lot going on in different areas, I can say.
That the DBS or the dry blood sample testing, does it test for still very focused on the it's focusing very specifically on doping substances, or it can that extend into other things? Because that sounds really interesting to have a little bit of blood to test many things.
Yeah, dried blood spot is a technique which is like being used in neonatal screening for a long time back. But this is like what we are working right now is to test for all the anti-doping prohibited substances, basically in just a spot of blood rather than using the large urine volume. So I mean, most of the laboratories are developing their methods to do this work.
That's amazing. So I know we are running out of time. So thank you so much for your time. If somebody, and by the way, if anybody is interested in Dr. Ahi's work, please you can contact her. Her information would be available in the show notes, as well as in the website as well. But please, if somebody wanted to contact you, how would they be able to do that, Dr. Ahi?
Shitosh, I'm very easily approachable by my email, which is shobha.ahi@kcl.ac.uk, and would be very happy to assist the young researcher and students in any way I could.
Absolutely, and I personally can attest to how approachable she is. She's brilliant. We've met a couple of times. We met in King's College, and Dr. Ahi has been really nice and really approachable, explaining to me that things I have never really knew before. So that's really true, and I can attest to that. So thank you for that. Just one last thing I want to ask you. We have spoken about all the work your lab does, amount of positive impact it has in the world for many people. And you have been working in this area for the past 17 years, for a long time. If I were to ask you, if you want to thank someone in this, in this long journey you have come, and doing something really important and meaningful, may I ask, who would you like to thank in this today, if you had the opportunity?
First of all, I'd like to thank you, Shirosh, to give me this opportunity to do the podcast and to spread the word about anti-doping, because I know not many people know about it. So yes, and of course, I am always very thankful to my mentor and my PhD guide, Professor Alkabe Utra, for believing in me and for actually inculcating in me the traits of an anti-doping scientist. And other than that, I would like to thank the director of the DCC, Professor Kimball, for her leadership and support. And of course, a very big thanks to my amazing workmates for all their hard work and for always keeping up with me through the thick and thin, because that's very important.
Absolutely, right. At the end of it, it's like as you mentioned, when it comes to a certain important event, or just everybody has to get together to do that job and to push things through. So exactly. As you said, it's all KPI driven as well. So it's not just doing research for research sake.
No, I can't do everything alone. I need my team.
Exactly, right. So thank you so much for your time. I honestly cannot say how appreciative I am of your time and your feedback and everything else. So thank you so very much. We hope to speak to you soon again. Maybe.
Yeah, sure.
So thank you so much. And thank you very much, everybody, for listening. We'll speak to you soon again. Thank you.
Thank you.